Castles, their ancient walls have witnessed centuries of battles, betrayals, and untold secrets. But some of these historic fortresses hold more than just memories. They hold spirits, legends, and dark forces that refuse to rest. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadowy halls and haunted corridors of Europe's most notorious castles, where echoes of the past take on a life of their own. I'm Mason, and this is Char TV. If you're drawn to the mysterious, the eerie, and the unexplained, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of those curious about the unknown, and your support means everything. Now, join me as we unravel the tales of ghostly encounters, demonic presences, and the restless spirits that haunt Europe's most legendary castles. Gather close to the fire, friends, and let its warm glow fend off the chill of the night. The wind whispers through the trees, and the stars above seem dimmer tonight, as if they too are leaning in to hear tales that blur the line between the living and the dead. I have stories to share, stories of ancient castles steeped in history, where the past never truly fades and shadows hold secrets untold. These are not mere legends, but accounts passed down through generations, tales of places where the walls themselves seem to breathe. So listen closely, for once you hear these stories, you may never see the world the same way again. Leap Castleman, the darkness within. In the heart of Ireland's rolling hills and mist-covered moors stands Leap Castle, a fortress that has withstood the ravages of time and the tempests of human strife. Its stone walls are thick, not just with mortar, but with memories, dark, turbulent memories that refuse to rest. The castle's history is soaked in blood and betrayal. Built by the ruthless O'Carroll clan in the 13th century, it was more than a home. It was a stronghold where power was maintained through fear and treachery. Brothers turned against brothers, and loyalty was a rare commodity. One of the most chilling tales revolves around the Bloody Chapel, a stark room perched atop the castle. Legend has it that during a mass, as the family gathered in solemn prayer, a violent dispute erupted between two O'Carroll brothers. One was a priest leading the service, and the other was driven by a hunger for power that knew no bounds. Without warning, the ambitious brother drew his sword and plunged it into the priest's back, staining the altar with familial blood. The priest collapsed, his life ebbing away, as he clutched the sacred relics, eyes wide with shock and betrayal. But the horror didn't end there. Hidden behind the walls of the Bloody Chapel was a secret oubliette, a deep, dark pit where prisoners were cast away and forgotten. During renovations in the 1920s, workers discovered this dungeon and were horrified to find human skeletons piled upon wooden spikes at the bottom. It took cartloads to remove the remains, each bone a silent testament to the cruelty that once reigned within these walls. Visitors to Leap Castle often speak of an oppressive atmosphere, as if the very air is weighed down by the anguish of lost souls. Shadows move where shadows shouldn't, and whispers drift through empty corridors. But perhaps the most terrifying presence is that of the elemental. The elemental is no ordinary spectre. Those who have encountered it describe a hulking figure shrouded in darkness, with eyes that burn like embers in a dying fire. But it's the smell that heralds its arrival, a stench of rotting flesh and sulfur that turns the stomach and chills the blood. Some say the elemental is the manifestation of the castle's accumulated evil, an amalgamation of malevolent forces unleashed by the bloodshed and occult practices rumoured to have taken place within. One night, the caretaker named Sean decided to explore the Bloody Chapel by candlelight. He was a pragmatic man, unshaken by the ghost stories that swirled around the castle. As he ascended the narrow, winding staircase, the flame of his candle flickered wildly, casting elongated shadows that danced upon the stone walls. Reaching the chapel, he found it silent, the air thick with a musty odour. He took a few steps inside when an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. The temperature plummeted, and the candle sputtered out, plunging him into darkness. Then came the smell, a nauseating blend of decay and sulphur that made his eyes water. Before he could react, a low growl resonated from the far corner of the room. His heart pounding, Sean fumbled for a match, his fingers trembling as he struck it against the rough surface. The small flame flared to life, illuminating the chamber, just enough for him to see a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him. Frozen in terror, he watched as the elemental began to materialize, a towering shadow that seemed to absorb the light. Its form was indistinct but undeniably menacing, a void where a face should be, save for those smoldering eyes. The match burned down to his fingertips, scorching his skin and snapping him back to reality. He let out a cry and turned to flee, stumbling down the stairs as an unearthly shriek echoed behind him. It was a sound that seemed to pierce his very soul, filled with rage and an insatiable hunger. Sean never ventured into the bloody chapel again. To this day he speaks of that encounter with a distant look in his eyes, as if part of him never truly left that room. Many who visit Leap Castle report similar experiences, cold spots that appear without warning, disembodied voices calling out from empty rooms, and apparitions that vanish as quickly as they appear. Some capture fleeting images on cameras, a shadow at the edge of a frame, a face in a window where no one stands. But it's the elemental that haunts the nightmares of those who dare to explore too deeply. Is it the restless spirit of someone wronged? Or is it something older, a primordial force awakened by the darkness that once thrived within those walls? No one can say for certain, but if you ever find yourself at Leap Castle and you feel a sudden chill or catch a whiff of a foul odor, take heed. Something watches from the shadows, something that should not be disturbed. Château de Brissac, the Lady in Green. In the picturesque Loire Valley of France, surrounded by lush vineyards and gentle hills, stands the majestic Château de Brissac. With its towering spires and elegant facade, it appears as a vision from a fairy tale. But as with many tales of beauty, darkness lurks beneath the surface. The chateau is known as the Castle of the Haunted Lady, a title earned through centuries of whispered legends and chilling encounters. The most famous spectre is that of La Dame Verte, the Lady in Green. The story dates back to the 15th century when Jacques de Breze, a nobleman of considerable standing, resided in the chateau with his wife Charlotte de Valois, the illegitimate daughter of King Charles VII. Their marriage was one of convenience rather than love, and it wasn't long before loneliness drove Charlotte into the arms of another man. One night, Jacques returned from a hunting trip earlier than expected. As he entered the chateau, he was informed by a servant of his wife's indiscretions. Consumed by rage, he stormed through the castle, his footsteps echoing ominously against the cold stone floors. Bursting into the bedchamber, he found Charlotte in the embrace of her lover. Blinded by fury, Jacques drew his sword and attacked without mercy, slaying them both in a brutal act of vengeance. The walls were said to be stained with their blood, and their cries of terror lingered long after the deed was done. But death did not bring peace to Charlotte. Her spirit remained trapped within the chateau, and over the centuries, countless residents and guests have reported encounters with the Lady in Green. One evening, a guest staying in one of the opulent bedrooms awoke to the sound of soft weeping. The room was bathed in moonlight, and as his eyes adjusted, he saw a figure standing by the window, a woman dressed in an elegant green gown, her hair cascading over her shoulders. "Madame," he called out softly, thinking perhaps it was another guest. She turned to face him, and he recoiled in horror. Her eyes were dark voids, and where her face should have been was a hollowed-out visage, as if the very essence of her identity had been stripped away. She raised a hand, reaching out toward him, her fingers delicate yet ghostly pale. Paralyzed by fear, he could only watch as she drifted closer, the temperature in the room plummeting. A whisper filled the air, barely audible yet filled with sorrow. "Why does no one see me?" she lamented. Just as she was within arm's reach, the apparition faded, leaving the room deathly quiet. The man fled the chateau the next morning, his face ashen, refusing to speak of what he'd seen. Others have reported similar encounters, footsteps echoing in empty corridors, doors opening and closing on their own, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. In the grand hall, some have heard soft whispers in French, words of love and betrayal carried on an unseen breeze. The current owners, the Duke and Duchess of Brissac, have embraced the chateau's haunted reputation. They speak openly of Charlotte's spirit, acknowledging her presence as part of the family's history. One of the staff members recounted an experience while preparing the dining room for a grand banquet. She was arranging place settings when she noticed a woman sitting at the far end of the table, dressed in an antique green gown. Thinking it was a guest arriving early, she approached to offer assistance. "Madam, may I help you?" she asked. The woman did not respond. As a staff member drew nearer, the figure slowly vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and a lingering chill. Even skeptics find it hard to dismiss the numerous accounts of supernatural occurrences at Chateau de Brissac. Whether it's the lady in green or the echoes of other restless spirits, the chateau seems to exist in a space where the past and present intertwine. Some say that Charlotte continues to search for redemption, or perhaps understanding, bound to the place where her life was so violently taken. Others believe that her appearances serve as a warning, a reminder of the consequences of passion and betrayal. If you ever visit the Loire Valley and find yourself drawn to the grandeur of Chateau de Brissac, take a moment to wander its halls. Listen to the whispers that seem to come from nowhere. Feel the cool touch of the air in rooms where no draught should exist, and perhaps, if you're attentive, you might catch a glimpse of the lady in green as she moves silently through the shadows. But be warned, once you see her, her sorrow may linger with you, a haunting memory that time cannot erase. As the flames of our campfire dance and crackle, casting flickering shadows that play upon our faces, these stories serve as a chilling reminder that the past is never truly gone. The walls of these ancient castles hold more than stone and mortar. They house the echoes of lives once lived, loves lost, and deeds that refuse to be forgotten. Houska Castle, the gateway to darkness. Deep within the dense forests of the Czech Republic, far from any village or trade route, stands Houska Castle, a fortress shrouded in mystery and dread. Unlike other castles, Houska was not built to defend against external enemies. Its walls face inward, and its location seems purposeless. But there is a chilling reason for its existence. It was constructed to seal a gaping hole in the ground, a pit believed to be a gateway to hell itself. The legend begins in the 13th century when local villagers discovered a massive chasm in the earth, so deep that no one could see the bottom. Those who ventured too close spoke of unseen forces, strange creatures emerging from the abyss, and whispers that lured people to the edge. Terrified, they appealed to the ruling lord, who ordered that the pit be covered and a chapel built over it to contain the evil within. But sealing the pit was no simple task. Before construction began, prisoners condemned to death were offered pardons if they agreed to be lowered into the hole and report what they saw. The first volunteer was tied with a rope and slowly descended into the darkness. Moments later, he began to scream uncontrollably, begging to be pulled back up. When they retrieved him, his hair had turned white and his face was etched with sheer terror. He babbled incoherently about grotesque creatures, half human, half beast, that swarmed in the darkness below. He died shortly after, his body racked with convulsions. Undeterred, the Lord proceeded with the construction. Houska Castle rose around the pit, its chapel directly over the supposed gateway. The walls were thick and the windows were mere slits, not designed to keep invaders out, but to keep something else in. Over the centuries, the castle changed hands many times. During the 30 Years' War, it fell into the possession of a Swedish commander named Oronto. He was rumoured to dabble in the dark arts, conducting sinister experiments within the castle's walls. Villagers reported seeing unnatural lights emanating from the windows at odd hours, and unearthly screams echoing through the night. One story tells of a local hunter who, curious and brave, decided to investigate. Under the cover of darkness, he approached Houska Castle. As he neared, he noticed a soft glow coming from the chapel. Peering through a crack in the door, he saw Oronto standing before the altar, reciting incantations in a language unknown to him. Suddenly, a figure materialized, a creature with the body of a man, but the head of a beast, its eyes glowing with malevolence. The hunter gasped, and the creature turned its gaze upon him. Paralyzed with fear, he could only watch as it moved toward the door. Snapping out of his trance, he fled into the woods, the sound of unnatural footsteps pursuing him. He escaped with his life, but was forever haunted by what he had witnessed. In more recent times, during World War II, The Nazis occupied Huska Castle. It is said they were drawn by the castle's dark reputation, hoping to harness occult powers for their own ends. Mysterious experiments were conducted, and villagers once again reported strange lights and sounds. After the war, the castle was abandoned, left to the ravages of time and the shadows that lurked within. Visitors to Huska Castle today speak of an oppressive atmosphere. Cold spots appear even on the warmest days, and electronic devices malfunction without explanation. Some claim to hear whispers in an unknown language, and shadows that move independently of any light source. One chilling account comes from a group of tourists who decided to explore the chapel. As they stood near the altar, one of them noticed a crack in the floor, a fissure they hadn't seen upon entering. A foul odor seeped up, a mix of sulfur and decay. Suddenly they heard a low growl emanating from the depths below. The ground trembled slightly, and a shadowy figure began to rise from the fissure, a formless mass that seemed to absorb the light around it. Panic set in, and they fled the chapel, the doors slamming shut behind them as if pushed by unseen hands. Whether Huska Castle truly sits atop a gateway to hell is a matter of belief, but the stories and experiences of those who have dared to venture there suggest that something sinister lies beneath. Perhaps it's best to let sleeping evils lie, undisturbed by the curiosity of mortals. Chillingham Castle, Echoes of Agony. Nestled in the rugged landscapes of Northumberland, England, stands Chillingham Castle, a medieval fortress with a name that suits its reputation. Its grey stone walls have witnessed centuries of turmoil, serving as a stronghold during the bloody border feuds between England and Scotland. But beyond its historical significance, Chillingham is infamous for its hauntings, so numerous that it's often called the most haunted castle in England. The castle's darkest chapter began during the reign of King Edward I, known as the Hammer of the Scots. Chillingham served as a base for his brutal campaigns, and its dungeons and torture chambers were put to gruesome use. The cries of prisoners echoed through the halls, and many met their end in unspeakable ways. One of the most enduring spirits is that of the Blue Boy, also known as the Radiant Boy. His presence is most strongly felt in the Pink Room, a lavishly decorated chamber that belies the tragedy associated with it. For years, guests reported hearing the wails of a child in the dead of night, the sounds emanating from within the very walls. At the stroke of midnight, a blue light would appear near the bed, slowly taking the form of a young boy dressed in tattered clothes, his face contorted in anguish. During renovations in the early 20th century, workmen broke through a thick wall and made a grim discovery: the skeletal remains of a child, clad in fragments of blue cloth. The bones showed signs of a violent death, and it was surmised that the boy had been entombed within the wall, perhaps to hide a terrible crime. After the remains were given a proper burial, the sightings of the Blue Boy decreased, but his presence was not entirely gone. Guests still report feeling a cold spot near the wall where he was found, and some hear faint cries that fade as quickly as they come. But the Blue Boy is not alone. The castle is said to be haunted by Lady Mary Berkeley, whose husband betrayed her with her own sister. Heartbroken, she wanders the corridors, her silk dress rustling softly as she searches for her unfaithful spouse. Visitors have felt a chill as she passes, and some have seen her forlorn figure gazing out of windows, lost in sorrow. Then there's the White Pantry Ghost, a frail figure dressed in white, who appears to kitchen staff and visitors alike. One night, a footman staying overnight near the pantry was awakened by a pale woman in a flowing gown. She pleaded with him for water, her voice barely above a whisper. Thinking she was a guest, he turned to fetch a glass, but when he looked back, she had vanished. It was later revealed that centuries ago, a maid had been poisoned in that very spot, and her spirit still seeks relief. Perhaps the most disturbing area is the torture chamber, a grim reminder of the castle's violent past. Instruments of pain and death are displayed, spiked chairs, cages, and racks that stretch the imagination and chill the soul. Visitors often feel an overwhelming sense of dread upon entering, and some have reported feeling touched or pushed by unseen hands. Photographs taken in the chamber sometimes reveal orbs or misty shapes that weren't visible at the time. One paranormal investigator while spending the night in the chamber, experienced something he'll never forget. As he sat in silence, he heard the faint sound of chains rattling. Dismissing it as his mind playing tricks, he continued his vigil. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his back, as if scratched by sharp nails. Jumping up, he lifted his shirt to find 3 red marks running down his skin. Shaken, he left the chamber, convinced that something malevolent lingered there. Chillingham Castle offers ghost tours for those brave enough to explore its haunted halls. Guides recount stories passed down through generations, and many guests leave with their own tales of unexplained phenomena. A whisper in the ear when no one is nearby, a fleeting shadow at the end of a corridor, or a sudden drop in temperature that raises every hair on the body. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, there's no denying the palpable atmosphere that permeates Chillingham Castle. It's as if the very stones have absorbed the anguish and torment of those who suffered within its walls, echoing their pain through time. So, if you ever find yourself wandering the grounds of Chillingham, pay heed to the whispers of the wind and the flicker of shadows. For in this place the past is never truly gone, and the spirits of the restless dead may be closer than you think. Dragsholm Slot, Spirits of the Three Ladies. On the wind-swept coast of Denmark's island of Zealand stands Dragsholm Slot, a castle whose serene exterior belies a tumultuous history filled with intrigue, imprisonment, and spectral hauntings. Built in the 12th century, Dragsholm has served as a fortress, a prison, and now a hotel. But beneath its modern comforts lies a tapestry of ghostly legends that continue to this day. The castle is said to be haunted by 3 spirits, each with their own tragic tale: the Grey Lady, the White Lady, and the ghost of the Earl of Bothwell. The Grey Lady is perhaps the most benign of the 3. She is believed to be the spirit of a young maiden who worked in the castle centuries ago. Afflicted by a painful toothache, she was treated kindly by the lord of the castle, who provided her with the necessary medical care. After her death, she returned to the castle as a way of expressing her gratitude. Guests and staff have reported seeing a gentle figure clad in grey, silently moving through the corridors, a soft smile on her face. Her presence is often accompanied by the scent of lavender and a comforting warmth. In stark contrast is the White Lady, whose story is one of love, betrayal, and despair. She was the daughter of a nobleman who resided in the castle during the Renaissance. Against her father's wishes, she fell deeply in love with a commoner, a local labourer whose charm and kindness won her heart. When her father discovered the affair, he was furious. To preserve the family's honour, he ordered that she be locked away within the castle walls, never to be seen again. For years, whispers circulated about her fate, but nothing was confirmed until a startling discovery in the early 20th century. During renovations, workers broke through a wall and uncovered a skeleton wearing a white dress, entombed within the bricks. It was a chilling confirmation of the legend. Since then, the White Lady has been seen wandering the halls, her face etched with sorrow. Guests have awakened in the night to find her spectral form at the foot of their beds, her eyes pleading, as if seeking someone to hear her story, or perhaps to help her find peace. But perhaps the most notorious spirit is that of James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell, the 3rd husband of Mary Queen of Scots. Accused of treason, he was imprisoned in Dragsholm Slot by the Danish king. The conditions were brutal. He was chained to a pillar in a dark, damp cell, where he languished for 10 years until his death. Visitors to the castle's dungeon report a heavy atmosphere, a sense of despair that is almost tangible. Some have heard the clanking of chains and anguished groans echoing through the stone walls. One guest exploring the lower levels claimed to have seen a gaunt figure dressed in tattered clothes, his eyes hollow and filled with torment. He reached out as if to grasp something or someone before fading into the shadows. The castle embraces its haunted reputation. Rooms are decorated in a style that honours its history, and guests are encouraged to explore the grounds. However, many who stay overnight report unexplained phenomena. Doors opening and closing on their own, whispers in empty rooms, and sudden chills that defy any logical explanation. One couple, staying in one of the oldest parts of the castle, experienced a night they would never forget. As they settled into bed, they heard soft footsteps pacing outside their door. Thinking it was a late-night staff member, they paid little attention. but the footsteps continued back and forth, accompanied by faint sobbing. Concerned, the husband opened the door, only to find the corridor empty. The sounds ceased. Shaking his head, he returned to bed. Moments later, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. Their breaths became visible in the frigid air. The figure of a woman in white appeared near the window, her back turned to them. She slowly turned her head, revealing a face streaked with tears, her eyes filled with despair. Frozen in fear, they could only watch as she moved toward the wall and vanished. The next morning, they recounted their experience to the staff, who nodded knowingly. "You have met the White Lady," they said. "She often appears to those who are open to her presence." Dragsholm Slot stands as a testament to the enduring nature of love, loss, and the restless spirits who cannot move on. Whether you're seeking a brush with the supernatural or simply wish to immerse yourself in history, the castle offers an experience that lingers long after you've left its ancient halls. So, if you ever find yourself in Denmark and you're drawn to places where the veil between worlds is thin, consider a visit to Dragsholm Slot, but be prepared, you may encounter more than just stories within its walls. The spirits of the Grey Lady, the White Lady, and the tormented Earl may be waiting to share their tales with those willing to listen. As the embers of our campfire glow softly, casting long shadows that dance among us, these stories serve as a reminder that history is never truly silent. The castles of Europe stand as grand monuments, but they are also keepers of secrets, echoes of lives once lived, of passions and pains that refuse to fade. Predjama Castle, the restless spirit of Arazem. Luega. In the rugged landscape of Slovenia, carved into the face of a towering cliff, stands Predjama Castle, a fortress both imposing and enigmatic. Its walls merge seamlessly with the rock, giving it an otherworldly appearance. But beyond its architectural marvel lies a tale of defiance, betrayal, and a spirit that cannot find peace. In the 15th century, Predjama was home to the rebellious knight Erasm Luega, a man of noble birth but a rogue at heart. Erasm was a sort of Slovenian Robin Hood, defying the Habsburg Empire by robbing the rich and aiding the poor. His audacity and charm won him the admiration of the common folk and the ire of the powerful. Erasm's defiance reached its peak when he avenged the death of his friend, killing a relative of the Austrian emperor. This act set in motion a siege of Predjama Castle, led by the emperor's forces. But Erasm was cunning. He utilized a secret network of tunnels that extended deep into the cliff, allowing him to smuggle in supplies and outlast his besiegers. The siege dragged on, and frustration grew among the attacking forces. They found an ally in one of Erasm's own servants, a man whose loyalty could be bought. Betrayal took root within the castle walls. One stormy night, the servant signaled to the besiegers that Erasm was in the privy, a vulnerable spot protruding from the cliffside. Seizing the moment, they fired a cannon, and the missile struck true. Erasm was killed instantly, his life snuffed out by treachery. But death did not end his story. Legend says that Erasm's spirit remains bound to Predjama Castle, restless and unavenged. Visitors to the castle have reported eerie occurrences, a chill that cuts through even on warm days, unexplained sounds echoing through the stone corridors, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. One evening, a group of tourists decided to explore the castle by lanternlight. Among them was a man named Jakob, a skeptic who scoffed at tales of ghosts. As they delved deeper into the castle's labyrinthine passages, the group began to feel uneasy. The air grew heavy, and the flickering lanterns cast dancing shadows on the ancient walls. They reached a chamber known as Erasm's quarters. Suddenly, a gust of wind extinguished their lanterns, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as whispers filled the air. Indistinct words carried on a cold breeze. Jakob laughed nervously, accusing his friends of playing tricks. Then, from the darkness, the sound of footsteps approached, measured metallic steps like armored boots on stone. The group huddled together as a faint glow appeared, taking the shape of a tall figure clad in knightly armor. His face was obscured by a helmet, but his presence was palpable, a mix of sorrow and defiance. "Who dares disturb my castle?" a deep voice echoed. Jakob stepped forward, his bravado faltering. "We mean no harm," he stammered. "We're just visitors." The figure raised an armored hand, pointing toward the exit. "Begone," he commanded. "This is no place for the living." The lanterns flickered back to life, revealing the chamber as it was before, empty, save for themselves. Without a word, the group retreated, leaving the castle in haste. Jakob, once a skeptic, found his disbelief shaken. He later learned that others had encountered the spectral knight, especially those who showed disrespect or doubt. Some say Erasm protects the castle, guarding it against intruders as fiercely in death as he did in life. Predjama Castle remains a place where the line between past and present blurs, where the spirit of a wronged knight lingers, bound by duty or perhaps a yearning for justice. Those who visit may feel his presence, a reminder that some stories are too powerful to fade away. Musham Castle, Shadows of Witchcraft, and the Werewolf Curse. High in the Austrian Alps, nestled among dense forests and snow-capped peaks, stands Musham Castle. Its picturesque setting belies a dark and tortured history, a place where fear once reigned supreme and where some say it still does. In the 17th century, Musham Castle was the epicenter of the Salzburg witch trials, one of the bloodiest persecutions in Europe's history. Hundreds were accused of witchcraft and brought to the castle's dungeons, where they faced cruel and inhumane treatment. Many confessed under torture, their pleas and cries echoing off the cold stone walls. The castle's halls are steeped in this anguish, and visitors often report a heavy atmosphere, as if the very air is weighed down by sorrow. Shadowy figures are seen gliding along corridors, disappearing around corners. Soft whispers and muffled cries emerge from empty rooms, chilling those who hear them to the bone. But the tales of Musham Castle grow darker still. In the years following the witch trials, the region was plagued by mysterious deaths and sightings of a beastly creature. Livestock were found slaughtered, their bodies torn and mangled. Villagers whispered of a werewolf, a cursed soul trapped between human and beast. One legend tells of a man named Hans, a former prisoner who escaped the castle's dungeons. He was a quiet, solitary figure, shunned by the villagers who feared his association with the castle's dark past. When the killings began, suspicions fell upon him. One moonlit night, a group of villagers gathered their courage and torches, venturing into the woods to confront Hans. They found his dwelling, but no sign of the man himself. As they searched, a chilling howl pierced the night, a sound that was neither wholly animal nor human. From the shadows, a creature emerged, a hulking figure with matted fur, glowing eyes, and a snarling maw. Panic ensued as the beast lunged at them, scattering the group. Some escaped, others were not so fortunate. In the aftermath, Hans was never seen again. The killing subsided, but the legend of the werewolf of Musham Castle took root. In modern times, the castle has become a museum, drawing those curious about its history and hauntings. One visitor, a writer named Clara, decided to spend a night within its walls, hoping to find inspiration for her next novel. As darkness fell, she roamed the castle's empty rooms, her footsteps echoing softly. The artifacts on display, a rusted chain here, a worn manuscript there, spoke volumes of the lives touched by this place. Entering the great hall, she felt a sudden drop in temperature. Her breath misted before her as she heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. Expecting to see another visitor or staff member, she turned, but the corridor was empty. A low growl emanated from the shadows. Clara's heart pounded as she saw a pair of eyes reflecting the dim light, eyes that shone with an unnatural brightness. The figure stepped into view, a tall, gaunt man with unkempt hair and ragged clothes, his gaze fixed upon her. "Lost, are we?" he whispered, his voice rasping like dry leaves. I was just exploring," Clara replied, forcing a smile. He took a step closer. "Be careful where you tread. Not all here are as they seem." Before she could respond, a noise from behind startled her. A clattering sound. She glanced back for a moment, and when she looked forward again, the man was gone. Shaken, Clara decided to return to her room. As she walked, the castle seemed to come alive, the creak of floorboards, the distant murmur of voices, and that pervasive sense of being watched. That night, sleep eluded her. She awoke to scratching sounds at her door, followed by a howl that sent shivers down her spine. Gathering her courage, she opened the door to find the corridor empty, but the air was thick with tension. The next morning, she recounted her experiences to the curator. He listened quietly before saying, "Many have seen him. The man who walks like a shadow. Some say he's the werewolf of legend. Others believe he's a restless spirit, bound to the castle by the injustices he suffered." Clara left Moosham Castle with more question than answers, her mind haunted by the night's events. The castle remains a place where history's dark echoes linger, where the line between reality and myth blurs. For those who visit, beware the shadows and the whispers of the night. Moosham Castle holds its secrets close, and it may share them with you when you least expect it. Berg Eltz, the silent guardian of the Eltz forest. Deep within the lush hills of Germany's Moselle Valley, surrounded by ancient forests and meandering rivers, stands Berg Eltz. This medieval castle, untouched by war and time, looks as if it were plucked from the pages of a fairy tale. But within its storied walls lies a legend that is both captivating and unsettling. The Eltz family has owned the castle for over 800 years, a lineage marked by honor and loyalty. Among their ancestors was a knight named Sir Karl von Eltz, a man renowned for his bravery and unwavering sense of duty. In times of turmoil, he defended the castle and its people with valor. One fateful night, word came of an approaching enemy force intent on seizing the castle. Sir Karl rallied his men, preparing for a battle they were sorely outnumbered to fight. As dawn broke, the clash began. The fighting was fierce, and Sir Karl led the charge, his presence inspiring courage in his outnumbered soldiers. Despite their efforts, the enemy breached the outer defences. In a final act of sacrifice, Sir Karl held the line on the castle gates, allowing his family and villagers to escape through secret passages. He fell in battle, his blood staining the very stones he swore to protect. Legends say that Sir Karl's spirit never left Berg Eltz. He remains its silent guardian, watching over the castle and those who dwell within it. Visitors often report a sense of calm in the castle, as if under the watchful eye of a benevolent protector. But there are times when his presence is felt more keenly, moments when danger lurks or respect is lacking. A young photographer named Lucas visited Berg Eltz, eager to capture its beauty. Enthralled by the architecture, he wandered off from his tour group, venturing into areas closed to the public. Finding a secluded room adorned with antique armor and weaponry, he set up his camera. As he adjusted the lens, he heard the faint sound of footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw a figure standing in the doorway, a tall man in ornate armor, helmet concealing his face. "You're not supposed to be here," the knight said, his voice echoing softly. Startled, Lucas began to apologize, explaining that he meant no harm. The knight raised a hand, and the air grew heavy. "Respect must be shown in this place," the knight intoned. "Leave now." The photographer blinked and the figure was gone. Shaken, he hurried back to the main hall where he rejoined his group. Later, he reviewed the photos on his camera. Among the images was one he didn't remember taking, a portrait of the very room he'd been in, with the knight standing at its center, eyes glowing faintly from beneath his helmet. Lucas showed the photo to a guide who listened intently. "That is Sir Karl," the guide said. "He appears when the castle or its honor is at stake. Consider yourself fortunate, his warnings are not always so gentle." Others have shared similar stories, feeling a firm but unseen hand guiding them away from precarious areas, or hearing footsteps pacing the battlements at night. Some speak of dreams in which a knight appears, offering counsel or caution. Berg Eltz remains a place where history is alive, a tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives, both past and present. Sir Karl's spirit embodies the castle's legacy, a guardian bound by duty and love for his home. For those who visit, respect the stones beneath your feet and the stories they hold. You may feel the gaze of the silent guardian upon you, a reminder that honor endures beyond the veil of time. As the fire dwindles and the night deepens, these tales linger in the air, entwining with the whispers of the wind. The castles of Europe stand as monuments to ages long past, yet their stories continue to unfold, etched into the very fabric of their existence. When you walk among such places, remember that you tread upon the echoes of history. Listen for the voices carried on the breeze. Watch for the flicker of shadows that move with purpose, and honor the spirits who may still roam the halls. Bran Castle, Shadows of the Impaler. In the heart of Transylvania, where mist clings to the dense forests and the Carpathian mountains rise like jagged teeth against the moonlit sky, stands Bran Castle. Its spires reach toward the heavens, piercing the fog that often envelops it. Though commonly known as Dracula's Castle, its true history is as enigmatic and haunting as any legend. The castle dates back to the 14th century, a sentinel on the border between Transylvania and Wallachia. While it's debated whether Vlad the Impaler, the ruthless prince who inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula, ever resided there, the locals have long woven tales that blur the lines between history and myth. Let me tell you about a man named André, a historian with a penchant for the supernatural. Drawn by the allure of Bran Castle's dark reputation, he decided to spend several nights within its walls, hoping to separate fact from fiction. On a cold autumn evening, André arrived at the castle as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was crisp and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The castle loomed above him, its silhouette stark against the twilight sky. He was greeted by Elena the caretaker, a woman whose eyes held the weight of countless stories untold. The castle has many moods, she warned. Respect it, and perhaps it will reveal its secrets. André settled into his modest quarters, a room adorned with antique furniture, heavy drapes, and a window overlooking the dense forest below. As night enveloped the castle, he began his exploration, candle in hand. The corridors were a maze of stone and shadow, the walls adorned with tapestries faded by time. As he wandered, the silence was broken only by the sound of his footsteps echoing off the cold floors. Entering the great hall, he was struck by a sense of déjà vu, as if he'd stepped into another era. The moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting fragmented patterns on the floor. A grand fireplace stood at one end, though no fire had burned there for years. As he examined the intricate carvings on an old wooden chair, a faint sound caught his attention, a soft whisper barely audible. He held his breath, straining to listen. The whisper came again, this time clearer, a woman's voice, melodic yet tinged with sorrow. "Who's there?" André called out, his voice unsettlingly loud in the vast room. Silence. He shook his head, attributing the sound to his imagination. Yet, as he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of his eye, a shadow that slipped behind a pillar. "André," the voice spoke his name, a mere breath carried on the wind. A chill ran down his spine. He wasn't alone. Summoning his courage, he followed the direction of the shadow into a narrow passageway he hadn't noticed before. The passage led him to a spiral staircase descending into the depths of the castle. Each step creaked underfoot, the air growing colder as he descended. At the bottom, he found himself in a dimly lit chamber, the dungeon. Chains hung from the walls, and old instruments of confinement lay scattered about, relics of a grim past. In the center of the room stood an iron maiden, its spiked doors ominously ajar. As André approached, the candle flickered violently before extinguishing, plunging him into darkness. Heart pounding, he fumbled for matches, his fingers shaking. Just as he struck a flame, a hand, cold and fragile, rested upon his shoulder. He spun around, the candle illuminating the pale face of a woman dressed in a tattered gown from centuries past. Her eyes were hollow yet piercing, filled with a sorrow that seemed to echo from the depths of time. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. André stumbled back, tripping over a broken chain and falling to the damp floor. The candle went out again, and in the darkness he heard her voice, now multiplied, a chorus of whispers enveloping him. "Free us. Avenge us." Desperate to escape, he crawled toward where he believed the staircase to be. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. The temperature plummeted, and he could see his breath forming misty clouds before him. Finally, his hands found the first step. He scrambled upward, the whispers following, morphing into wails of despair. Reaching the top, he slammed the door behind him, leaning against it as he caught his breath. The castle had come alive with sounds, the distant clanging of unseen bells, footsteps echoing in corridors far and near, and that relentless whispering. Andrei raced back to his room, locking the door and drawing the heavy drapes. He lit every candle he could find, their collective glow offering little comfort against the oppressive darkness. Sleep was impossible. Throughout the night, shadows seemed to move of their own accord along the walls. At one point, he watched in terror as a figure emerged from the fireplace. A tall man clad in armor, his face obscured by shadow. The figure pointed a gauntleted finger at Andrei, then vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. The room fell silent, but the sense of dread remained. Come morning, Andrei sought out Elena. She listened quietly as he recounted the night's events, her expression grave. You have seen the restless souls, she said, those who suffered within these walls. The castle holds their pain, and sometimes it reaches out to those who are willing to see. Why me? Andrei asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You came seeking truths, she replied, but some truths are not meant for the living. Determined to uncover more, Andrei delved into the castle's archives. He discovered accounts of people imprisoned unjustly during the reign of various rulers, tales of starvation, torture, and despair. One story told of a noble woman accused of witchcraft, entombed alive within the walls. That night, against Elena's warnings, Andrei returned to the dungeon. Armed with a lantern and newfound knowledge, he sought to confront the spirits. I know your stories, he called out into the darkness. I want to help you find peace. The room remained silent. Then the lantern flickered and the spirits began to materialize. Translucent figures emerging from the walls, their faces etched with anguish. The noble woman stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. Our stories are forgotten, she said, but the pain remains. What can I do? Andrei asked, his fear giving way to compassion. Tell the world of what happened here, she implored. Let the truth be known. He nodded solemnly. I will. As dawn approached, the spirits began to fade, their expressions softening. The noble woman offered a faint smile before disappearing. In the days that followed, the castle seemed less oppressive. The shadows retreated, and the whispers ceased. Andrei left Bran Castle, carrying with him the weight of the stories he had learned. True to his word, he published his accounts, shedding light on the darker chapters of the castle's history. Some dismissed his work as mere folklore, but others felt the resonance of truth within his words. Even today, visitors to Bran Castle report strange occurrences, fleeting shadows, sudden chills, and the feeling of unseen eyes watching from the ramparts. Some say that the spirits are at rest, grateful for their stories being told. Others believe that the castle remains a conduit between worlds, a place where the veil is thin. Perhaps it's the land itself, steeped in legend and bathed in moonlight, that stirs the imagination, or maybe, just maybe, the souls of the past linger still, waiting for those who are willing to listen. So if you ever find yourself wandering the halls of Bran Castle, tread lightly. Listen to the whispers of the wind as it weaves through the turrets, and be mindful of the shadows that dance just beyond the edge of sight. For in this place, the past is never truly gone, and the echoes of history may reach out to touch you when you least expect it. As the fire crackles and the night deepens, remember that stories have power, the power to awaken, to warn, and to connect us to those who came before. Sleep well, my friends, and may your dreams be free of shadows. These castles stand as monumental relics of Europe's history, yet within their walls, the past is anything but silent. From tragic spirits and ghostly nights to dark presences guarding ancient secrets, each story reminds us that some mysteries are destined to linger. Thank you for joining me. I've been Mason, here on Char TV, as we ventured through the haunted and the historic. If you're fascinated by tales of the supernatural and the unexplained, Don't forget to subscribe for more dives into the world's hidden legends and eerie encounters. Until next time, remember history may be in the past, but some shadows never truly fade.